One of the most immediate challenges for Colombia is adjusting to the external shock posed by the fall in the price of oil since mid-2014. Now, before the oil price collapse, Colombia depended on oil exports for about 65% of its revenue, and this has caused a rather large trade deficit of about $16 billion as of last year. Now, the real problem for the Colombian government is that public finances are going to remain in austerity mode for the next few years. Infrastructure projects are going to be cut because of the lack of oil royalties, and this is going to further pose a challenge for some areas in terms of improving public transportation. Some highways will not be built, some river dredging projects will not happen, and while this is not really a major setback for the country, it is going to delay certain projects that could have improved transportation at local levels from getting off the ground for at least a few more years. Now, in the near term, another major challenge for the government will be implementing the agreements with the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia if a peace agreement is signed this year. Again, public finances are strained. That is going to represent a bit of a threat for the government in implementing these agreements, but also really doing something about the demobilized FARC members, integrating them back into society is going to be a challenge, not only because of the financial problems, but also because of the fact that FARC members may remain involved in criminal activities and could pose isolated risks not only to security forces, but also to people and businesses operating in the country. So this is really something that is going to challenge the government over the next year. So overall, a peace deal with the FARC in the next year would reduce the threat from the group by essentially making it less of a coherent organization. If a peace agreement is signed, obviously the FARC secretariat, the top leaders, are going to demobilize, although some of the rank and file may remain in the field, conducting many of the same activities such as extortion, drug production, and drug trafficking that they were doing before the deal was signed. However, because there will be less of a militant threat, less of a coherent threat against private businesses, against security forces, and against citizens in general, really the risk is going to go down overall. Now, one of the major problems is that as the FARC demobilize, other groups may try to rush in to fill some of the voids in the criminal economies left over by the FARC as they're leaving, or if they perceive a weakness on the part of the isolated FARC groups left in the field. And so in certain areas, violence may rise as these groups fight over localized resources, but overall across the board, we do expect the risk to go down simply because the FARC is not going to be a coherent criminal organization or a coherent militant group anymore. So at this point, there are political and security factors that could potentially delay the signing of an agreement with the FARC in Colombia right now. The first of these, obviously, is the implementation of things like transitional justice courts that have already been decided upon. Last year, the government and the FARC leadership settled the question of whether or not the FARC would be able to access these transitional courts, confess their crimes there, and receive amnesty rather than going through the criminal justice system, which the FARC did not want to do. Now, these courts have to be implemented. Questions still have to be decided as to who gets to access them and how they will be set up. And really, the nature of this is still controversial among the FARC leadership and the government negotiators. On the security front, however, we have the Clan Usuga that has recently become more active in the country, and the existence of the Clan Usuga, which is a criminal group descended from the paramilitary umbrella organization, the United Self-Defense Forces of Colombia, that demobilized 10 years ago. Now, the thing about the Clan Usuga is they are a coherent group, and the FARC likely does not feel safe demobilizing with a strong Clan Usuga still out in the field. If the FARC demobilizes, they could potentially get targeted on an individual basis by this organization, which is ideologically and criminally opposed to the FARC. So really, we do expect to see the government continue targeting the Clan Usuga to weaken it, perhaps to provide guarantees to the FARC to successfully ensure their demobilization over the coming year.